You may be seated. Good afternoon, and welcome to our annual Veterans Concert. We'd like to thank Chief Master Sergeant Tom Puzo and the Salem High School Air Force Junior ROTC Color Guard for their presentation during the national anthem. And also Andrew Algary, for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The first half of our concert will feature the Timberlane Jazz Band, so please welcome their director, John Manila.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this afternoon. Because as we always like to say, that if it wasn't for the audience, this would just be a glorified rehearsal. So thank you. The first tune you heard, this is our first, let me back up a little bit. This is the first time at a Veterans Day concert that the jazz band has actually performed. It's always been a concert. So yes. So we decided to have a theme here, and we're featuring band leaders who were in the military. And that's going to take us through just a couple. There were quite a few, but we're featuring just 3 today. Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, and Benny Goodman. And I'll give you some more little background on each one of those, although you probably know all you're going to need to know already, but we're going to go through a couple of those. But the first tune we did was Jersey Bounce. And a little bit about that one. It hit #1 for 4 weeks way back in 1942 as an instrumental recorded by Benny Goodman and his orchestra. It also charted that same year by Jimmy Dorsey, it charted at #9, and Shep Fields at #15. Versions of Jersey Bounce were performed by Glenn Miller, Harry James, Red Norvo, Jan Savitt, Ella Fitzgerald, Ella Mae Morse, and the King Sisters. So all of these tunes, they were done by just more than one group. During World War II, something very interesting, during World War II, the title, Jersey Bounce, was popular as a nickname for military aircraft. And there were 3 of them that were named appropriately, Jersey Bounce 1, Jersey Bounce 2, and Jersey Bounce 3. Out of all 3 of those, only one of them was actually retired. The other 2 met an untimely end. But luckily, no one was killed in this untimely end. So that's Jersey Bounce. The next one we'd like to do for you is called Stompin' at the Savoy. So, Stompin' at the Savoy, although this song is often credited to Benny Goodman, Chick Webb, Edgar Sampson, and Andy Razaf, it's written and arranged by Sampson, who was Rex Stewart's alto saxophonist. Sampson wrote the song when he was with Stewart's orchestra at the Empire Ballroom in 1933. It was used as the band's theme song until the band broke up, after which Sampson joined Chick Webb's band. Are all these names coming back? Anybody recognize these names? Good, all right. Taking the song with him, the band broke up, after which Sampson joined Chick Webb's band, taking the song with him. Webb's recording rose to number 10 on the charts in 1934. 2 years later, the piece charted with versions by Ozzie Nelson and Benny Goodman. Both Webb and Benny Goodman recorded it as an instrumental, Goodman's being the bigger hit. Lyrics were added by lyricist Andy Razaf. So, I'm going to give you a little bit, right now is the time for me to mention some of these arrangers. So I'm going to start with Glenn Miller. Glenn Miller joined the Air Force on 12/15/1944. Unfortunately, his plane went down and he was never found again. They still to this day have not been able to find his body, and he was only 40 years old. He's considered to be the father of military bands. He studied with a gentleman called Joseph Schillinger out of New York City. And here's a really kind of a little neat little sidebar. Joseph Schillinger is the man who actually, along with Lawrence Burke, started the Berklee College of Music in Boston. Yeah, so I can remember way back in 19, whatever it was, while I was there, Joseph Schillinger was a big name because he had all kinds of books out, and he was a catalyst for the Berklee College of Music. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I've been remiss here. I've not been announcing our soloist, so I'm going to do that now. And earlier in this couple of songs, you heard Nick back there on trumpet, Scott on trombone, Kara on the clarinet, Tina on the clarinet also, Michael over here on piano. Okay, I got everybody covered. Sorry about that. All right, I'm so worried about getting my notes right here. All right, so Opus 1, which is what we just played, that started as a vocal song. Does anybody know who it was that sang that as a vocal? You can yell it out.
Ella.
Nope. The Mills Brothers. Ah, yeah, the Mills Brothers introduced that song. That was their tune, and then it got picked up. It said, Opus 1 is a timeless classic by the Mills Brothers that has captivated audiences for decades. The iconic song holds a deep and profound meaning, touching the hearts of listeners with its beautiful melody and poignant lyrics. You didn't hear the lyrics. You have to imagine. The song takes us on a journey of love, longing, and the power of music to connect souls. Let us dive deeper into the meaning behind Opus 1 and explore the emotions it evokes. And hopefully, I was supposed to read this first, so you've got those emotions as you were listening to it being played.
Too late.
Right? Too late. Opus 1 has been covered by various artists over the years. Notable covers include those by Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra, as well as Benny Goodman and his orchestra. Now, let me find my sheet here. I should have done like, Sue Minor's so good with these. She has little note cards, and they're all numbered, and Manella just scribbled stuff on the paper. It's my ADHD. So, Tommy Dorsey. Tommy Dorsey was rated second to all others band leaders at this time. He just came in second. But he was overall the most popular band leader of the times. Him and his brother, Jimmy, had a band, but they always, as brothers will do, especially when they have to work together, a lot of disagreements between the two of them. So finally, Tommy left, and he spent 2 years in the Army. And then from there, he went on to start his own group, small groups, large groups. But you probably remember Jimmy and Tommy. And what instrument did Tommy Dorsey play? Anybody? Trombone. What instrument did Jimmy Dorsey play? What was it? Alto sax. Yeah, yeah. So today we're just featuring Tommy. We're not featuring Jimmy, because I heard he was the bad guy out of the two, and he drove his brother away. So we're not giving him any credit. few soloists there. We had Mr. Jim over here on tenor sax, Kara on alto sax, Gil on tenor sax. Let's see, Nick on trumpet? No, Nate on trumpet. Nate played that trumpet. Nate, all right. So, String of Pearls. On November 3rd, 1941, Glenn Miller and his orchestra recorded what would become one of their biggest hits, the Jerry Gray original composition and arrangement of a swing instrumental titled A String of Pearls. By February 1942, the RCA Bluebird record would top the Billboard Top 10 best-selling record charts. It was one of the most successful results of the historic collaboration between Glenn Miller and Jerry Gray that produced more top 10 records during the fastest time period of any musical team in history. A String of Pearls has a very interesting history, and many collaborators, including jazz cornet legend Bobby Hackett. The story of A String of Pearls includes Glenn Miller and his orchestra. The Glenn Miller Army Air Forces Orchestra and many other artists. A String of Pearls remains one of the most requested and performed tunes by today's Glenn Miller Orchestra and is instantly recognized and identified with Glenn Miller. This rich legacy is documented in our history, which can be found any place you look up Glenn Miller. So, let me do our last conductor, our last big band conductor, and that is Mr. Manella. Where is the sheet? Here it is. Benny Goodman. Now, Benny Goodman is very interesting because we are featuring today band leaders who were in the U.S. military, but Benny Goodman was not in the military, the U.S. military. He was in the RAF, the Royal Air Force, because he was born in England. But I figured England was an ally, so he's the same thing. American, English, what's the difference, right? So, he's known as the King of Swing. His most famous concert was Concert at Carnegie Hall on January 16th, 1938. Benny Goodman, growing up, started training as a classical clarinetist. He took many, many lessons from classical clarinetists. As a matter of fact, at one point in his career, he had to change his entire embouchure, which is the way he forms his mouth on the clarinet or saxophone mouthpiece or any wind instrument. Normally, when you play clarinet, your top teeth go on the top of the mouthpiece and your bottom lip goes over your bottom teeth. But Benny had to start learning a new technique because of the teacher he was studying with. And he put both lips over teeth. And that was really tough. He really, really struggled with it for a long time. But if you listen to any later on Benny Goodman performances, he got over it very, very quickly. So he really kind of introduced this whole new method of playing the clarinet in jazz. It had been used in classical music, classical clarinet playing, but he is the one who introduced it to jazz. So that's good old Benny Goodman. One, two, oh, 2, 3, 4. we have Bob back there on the trumpet solo? All right. So, Pennsylvania 5000 is a telephone number in New York City, written in the 2L plus 5N, which means 2 letters, 5 numbers, format that was common from about 1930 into the 1960s. The number is best known from the 1940 hit song Pennsylvania 5000, a swing, jazz, and pop standard recorded by the Glenn Miller Orchestra. Its owner, the Hotel Pennsylvania, claims to be the oldest continuously used telephone number in New York City. The hotel opened on January 25th, 1919, but the exact age of the telephone number and the veracity of the hotel's claim are unknown. For many years, callers to 212-736-5000 were greeted with the hotel's phone system recorded greeting that includes a portion of the song. The hotel closed permanently in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic and is being torn down to make way for a tower, at 15 Penn Plaza. The tower's developer, Stephen Roth, said in 2022 that the new building would retain the phone number 212-736-5000, although he did not specify how the phone number would be reassigned. The named Pennsylvania Exchange served the area around Penn Station in New York. The 2 letters PE stand for the numbers 7 and 3, making the phone number 736-5000, not including the later area code 212 for Manhattan. Our last number is going to be In the Mood. Artie Shaw's version was over 6 minutes long and met a very lackluster of audience response, as you can imagine, 6 minutes. Jerry Gray arranged Shaw's version. The band later performed a shorter version. The Hayes recording was over 3 minutes in length to fit on one side of a 78 record. So you can see what drove the industry. The song was sold in 1939 to Glenn Miller, who experimented with the arrangement. In the Mood is a popular big band era jazz standard recorded by bandleader Glenn Miller. In the Mood is based on the composition Tar Paper Stomp by Wingy Manone. What a name. The first recording under the name In the Mood was released by Edgar Hayes and his orchestra in 1938. So you can see all of these songs we've done today had numerous renditions of them. And each one, even though today we tried to do the original, whoever made it famous, the original transcription, we got arrangements that are actually transcribed from the recording. So we're pretty good here trying to reproduce the originals. But they had all different kinds of versions of these songs, just like they do today. So our last tune is going to be In the Mood. I would just like to remind you that we have a drum back here. When the lights come on, you'll see it right here. For any donations that you'd like to make, because we offer these concerts free of charge. We like to do that, but any money that you can put into that drum back there will help defray the cost of music for the 2 groups that you're going to hear today. So we'd like to thank you, and during intermission, there's plenty of goodies out there, and I recommend the little cream puff balls. I've already sampled them. I wanted to make sure they were good before I recommended them. 1, 2, oh, 3. Saxophone, stand up. Rhythm section, take a bow. All right. So, I'd be remiss not just to mention this. This group, they get together for 1 hour every Thursday to rehearse. Our next concert is going to be December 16th, which is going to be it's Tuba Christmas, and it's going to be the concert band and the jazz band with a Christmas theme. But I just want, you guys can sit down. I just want to acknowledge, though, that we have some high school students in this group. Stand up. Stand up. Right, and then we have Seb back here on the bass. And then we also have some former students of Timberlane in this band. If you were a former student in Timberlane Music Department, stand up. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, well, except for Mrs. Jacoby, I had them as students. But I was only 13. So, well, thank you once again for coming. We're going to take a brief intermission here to reset the stage for the concert band. You can go out there and have some refreshments and then be back in for the second half of the program. Thank you.
So we're ready to start the second half of the program, which will feature the Timberlane Community Band as well as Gil LaPointe, our conductor. The first piece that we will be playing is National Emblem, which is composed by Eugene Bagley. National Emblem is a march composed in 1902 and published in 1906 by Edwin Eugene Bagley. It is a standard of the American march repertoire, appearing in 11 published editions. Bagley composed the score during a 1902 train tour with his family band. He became so frustrated with the ending that he just tossed the whole competition in the bin. Members of the band fortunately retrieved it and secretly rehearsed the score in the baggage car. Bagley was surprised when the band informed him minutes before the next concert that they would perform it. It became the most famous of all Bagley's marches. Despite this, the competition did not make him very wealthy because he sold the copyright for $25. The U.S. military uses the trio section as a ceremonial music for the color guard when presenting and retiring the colors. John Philip Sousa once was asked to list the 3 most effective street marches ever written. Not surprisingly, Sousa listed 2 of his own compositions, but for the 3rd, he selected National Emblem. When Sousa formed and conducted the 350-member U.S. Navy Jackie Band at the Naval Station Great Lakes, he chose 5 marches for the World War I Liberty Bond drives. 4 were by Sousa, Semper Fidelis, Washington Post, The Thunderer, Stars and Stripes Forever, and the 5th was Bagley's National Emblem. Our second piece is America the Beautiful, composed by Samuel Augustus Ward and arranged by Carmen Dragon. The poem America the Beautiful first appeared in print in the Congregationalist, a weekly journal, on July 4th, 1895. Over the years, it has become the country's unofficial second national anthem. The poem was written by Catherine Lee Bates, a longtime professor at Wellesley College and a native of Falmouth, Mass. She couldn't have known that those 4 stanzas, hastily scribbled into a notebook on her trip west in 1893, would attain such fame. Atop Pikes Peak in Colorado Springs, she was electrified by the beauty that was her country, and in writing that, it later became America the Beautiful, and it passed on that intense love for her country to all Americans. In 1926, the National Federation of Music Clubs held a contest to put the poem to music, but none of the entries were deemed suitable. The poem has been sung to a variety of music, but today, America the Beautiful is almost exclusively sung to Samuel A. Ward's Materna. Our speaker today is a U.S. Air Force veteran. He served from 1963 to 1969 in the U.S. Air Force, and then the U.S. Air Force Reserves from 1969 through 1993. Please join me in welcoming New Hampshire State Representative Kenneth Weiler.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon. Wonderful music. I'm Ken Weiler. Some of you may be familiar with the name. It's been on ballots in several towns as I've been running for state representative, now in my 34th year. I've always represented Kingston, but through 6 different redistricting, several other towns were added to it at various times. And in alphabetical order, they were, or are, Brentwood, Chester, Danville, East Kingston, Hampstead, Newton, Plastow, and Sandown. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. I began my career after graduating from MIT in the ROTC program in June of 1963. I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the Air Force. I got married, and I and my new wife journeyed to Craig Air Force Base in Selma, Alabama, where I went through Air Force pilot training for a year from July 1963 to July of 1964, where I was trained in T-37s and T-33s. On graduation, I was assigned to be a transport pilot in the C-124 at McCord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington. The C-124 was a huge airplane, 200-foot wingspan, clamshell doors, and the nose where you could drive in 2 6x6 trucks in a row. You could and 4 big propeller engines. You could crawl out in the wings to check on those wings in flight. Crew of 6. We flew worldwide missions. Mostly in those years it was to Vietnam. We carried ammo and equipment over, and on the way back, rehauled equipment, plus sometimes coffins and casualties. After two years of that, the whole squadron went to the brand new airplane, C-141. Another big airplane. It was a jet. It wasn't quite as cavernous a cargo compartment, but it was longer, and it flew a lot higher and a lot faster. But we still did the same mission, back and forth mostly to Vietnam and sometimes other parts of the world. After 2 years of doing that, I was finally an aircraft commander. But then, here's your assignment. You're going to Vietnam permanently for a year, from 68 to 69. But you'll be in a different airplane. You'll be a special operations pilot in the psychological operations business. You'll have this little push-pull Cessna, 4 seats, but it's armed with 18,000-watt loudspeakers. So I'd play reel-to-reel tape recordings for the audience below that sometimes was the bad guys flying in the jungle, either North Vietnamese or Viet Cong, and the gist of the message was, hey, we know where you are. You better hurry up and surrender. The bombers are coming behind me, and you're dead. We also had to be careful because we also had a set of messages that we'd play to pacify a village. We're your friends. Show your passes. Don't pull guns on us. We're coming in there to make sure that the bad guys are gone from your village. So even though it was in Vietnamese, I had to check, make sure I had the right message. Had to be careful. We also had a low-level mission. Da Nang was quite often rocketed with these great big 10-foot-long rockets that weren't very accurate, and they were kind of set up on mud ramps miles away to try to do damage of the Da Nang Air Base, but it was such a huge base, they weren't very effective. But they'd wake us up at 5 in the morning about once a week. So one of our missions was to go out and fly low level, look around for a crew of 6 or 7 carrying these rockets or building a mud ramp. So it was kind of fun to fly low level, flying down the road, looking at the guy in the guard tower at the same height as I was. And one time I flew with another pilot, and he had 2 sets of controls, He was going up a river and thought he was pretty low. The docks were above us. And I looked behind us and we were leaving a wake in the water. Another time we're going up a river with a security policeman who had a certain area he wanted to check out. So we're going up this river, and there's kind of a bend and a loop in the river, and across that's going a big sandbar. So as I'm flying over the sandbar, it was odd. People would hear you coming and they ducked down. As soon as you went by, they looked up. So we're going over the sandbar. I turned around and looked. A door opens up in the side of the sandbar, and a head peeks out. And I said, "Did you see that?" And I started to turn around to go back, and he said, "Don't turn around. They'll know you saw them." Sure enough, the machine gun starts up. I couldn't get out there fast enough, but they managed to do a little damage. Here's the window, here's the high wing, big gash with fuel pouring out. But we made it back, and that was the end of that little flight. So I finished up that tour. I was awarded the Air Medal with 7 oak leaf clusters and a Distinguished Flying Cross. And I joined the Air Force Reserve, and that was in McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, but I got to fly the C-141 for almost another 17 years. I loved that airplane. And also had time to go and join American Airlines, and what a great airline, as a friend of mine and I just talked about. I got to do both careers together, because we'd do about 12 days a month on an airline trip, 3 on, 4 off kind of thing. And it also left me time to fit in those trips on the C-141. So I retired with 30 years of total service between the active duty and the Air Force Reserve. And a few years later, got my 30 years in American Airlines and retired as an international captain. I am a member of about 5 different veterans organizations. I hold positions in 2 of them, the Kingston Veterans Club and the New Hampshire Veterans Association, which owns a reservation near Lake Winnipesaukee with a lot of buildings on it. With many friends in these organizations, we talked about our military experiences. Some of my friends had as few as 2 years of service, while others had stayed to earn a retirement. But all of us agreed how important our lives had been because of our military experiences. The challenges and tests in our training, in our careers, ingrained in us at least 3 important life lessons. Number 1 was self-confidence. I can get through that, I can do anything. Number 2, self-control. And number 3, the importance of working together. I believe we all value being a veteran, and we could not have had these careers without the support of our wives, who took care of our homes and families and always welcomed us home. I'm grateful to the Timberlane Community Music Association for this wonderful music and hospitality, and I thank you all for your attention.
See him trying to run away. We're not that scary. We have a plaque for you from the Timberlane Community Music Association. So on this 12th day of November of 2023, we'd like to thank Representative Kenneth Weiler from the Rockingham District 14 for his participation in our annual Veterans Day concert. Thank you so much for your remarks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service. We'd like to continue our program with the Dauntless Battalion, which is a march composed by John Philip Sousa. The Dauntless Battalion is an American military march by John Philip Sousa, published in 1922 and dedicated to the faculty and cadets of the Pennsylvania Military College in Chester, Pennsylvania. Sousa mentioned his vision of the college's cantering cavalry horse display that was so famous during that era when choosing the title for this march. Historically, cavalry are soldiers or warriors who fight mounted on horseback. They were the most mobile of combat arms, operating as light cavalry in the roles of reconnaissance, screening, and skirmishing, and as heavy cavalry for decisive shock attacks. The importance of horses in warfare dropped off over the centuries with each arrival of new, more deadly weapons. The development of powerful bows and arrows that could pierce the horse's armor, as well as the introduction of guns, meant that horses were no longer invincible. Even so, as recently as 100 years ago, millions of horses were still used in battle. The last hurrah came with World War I. At the beginning of that war, in 1914, cavalry charges, in which thousands of soldiers on horseback rode into battle together, were still seen as a major offensive tactic. But trench warfare, barbed wire, machine guns, and other modern developments effectively brought such charges to a dead halt. By the war's end, horses were still used behind the lines to transport guns and supplies, but their role in leading the attack had become a thing of the past. Next, we are going to play a Copeland tribute arranged by Claire Grunderman. This piece, a collage of various works of Aaron Copland, was created in 1985 to honor the Brooklyn-born composer's 85th birthday. It opens with Fanfare for the Common Man, featuring brass and percussion, which he composed in 1942 at the request of the Cincinnati Symphony, who commissioned fanfares from various composers to begin their concerts during the 1942 and 43 season. Most of the songs had military themes, such as Fanfare for Airmen, Fanfare for the Fighting French, and Fanfare for the American Soldier. But Copeland came at the assignment from a more grassroots level. I sort of remember how I got the idea of writing Fanfare for the Common Man, he recalled later. It was the common man, after all, who was doing all the dirty work in the war and in the army. He deserved a fanfare. Fanfare for the Common Man premiered on March 12, 1943, and the 3-minute musical work stirred patriotic feelings like few others did, as it seemed to capture in music the notion of people bravely joining forces to stand against danger. And it still stirs the hearts of Americans today, whether they recognize it by name or just by its soaring notes. Also featured in this medley are Copeland's Appalachian Spring, variations on a Shaker melody, and 2 songs from his ballet Rodeo, Buckaroo Holiday and Hoedown. Next, we'd like to play for you Amazing Grace, arranged by Frank Kelly. The spiritual Amazing Grace was written by John Newton, who lived from 1725 to 1807. John was a slave ship captain who, after years of transporting slaves across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World, suddenly saw through divine grace the evilness of his acts. The music was first published in 1835 by William Walker and has since grown to become one of the most beloved of all American spirituals. Amazing Grace came to be an emblem of a Christian movement and a symbol of the U.S. itself as a country, as it was involved in a great political experiment, attempting to employ democracy as a means of government. The dangers, toils, and snares of Newton's lyrics had both literal and figurative meanings for Americans. This became pointedly true during the most serious test of the American cohesion in the U.S. Civil War from 1861 to 1865. Amazing Grace was included in 2 hymnals that were distributed to the soldiers. With death so real and imminent, religious services in the military became commonplace. The arranger of this piece wanted his setting of Amazing Grace to reflect the powerful simplicity of the words and melody, to be sincere, to be direct, and to be honest.
So, thank you very much. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a few people because, yeah, I get to stand in front and take all the bows, but I do not do this by myself by any means or any imagination. So first, I'd like to recognize the board who organizes all of this so that we can put this concert on. So board, could you please stand up and be recognized? Also, I'd like to recognize the people who put together the wonderful refreshments that we had out there for you. So if they could stand up as well and be recognized. And just like the jazz band earlier, I would like to take a second and mention that one of the great things about community band is we have people who have been in the band and been playing their instruments. We won't say how long, just say a long time. But we also have high school students. Could my high school students please stand or give a wave or wherever you are back there? And the great thing about that is the music gets passed down from generation to generation. So those who have experience can share it with those younger, and we can keep this tradition of band music alive in this country. With that all being said, if you enjoyed tonight's concert, as Mr. Manella said when he was doing jazz band, we have a donation drum out back there, and we can always use that money to purchase music or equipment, or we try to do lots of good with that. So every little bit helps, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, our next piece is called Armed Forces Salute, and it's arranged by Bob Loden. This melody features the themes from all 5 of our nation's military branches: Army, Coast Guard, Marines, Air Force, and Navy. All these tunes are familiar and stir pride in our hearts. Nearly every American has either served in or been close to someone who served in the military. Listening to these tunes is another reminder that freedom is always a work in progress, and that sacrifice has been demanded generation after generation to keep that freedom secure. So when you hear your branch's song, we would appreciate it if you would stand so we may all recognize you for the great sacrifice you made for all of us.
Thank you once again, and we would like to take one last opportunity because you couldn't see us during that song, and we couldn't see you to properly thank you. So if all the veterans could just stand one last time, including the ones in the ensemble, could you just stand one last time so we can recognize you? Thank you very much for your service. Thank you again. And before we close out this concert, I'd just like to remind you that if you enjoyed this, we have our holiday concert on December 16th. It'll feature Tuba Christmas, the jazz ensemble, which you saw earlier, and the same concert band right here. So if you enjoyed it, come on back and bring friends.
We'd like to conclude our concert with "The Stars and Stripes Forever," composed by John Philip Sousa. John Philip Sousa was an American bandmaster and composer. He was a leader of the band of the United States Marine Corps from 1880 to 1892. When he resigned, he organized his own band, which quickly realized great success. In late 1896, Sousa and his wife took a much-deserved vacation to Europe. While there, Sousa received word that the manager of the Sousa Band had died suddenly. The band was scheduled to begin another cross-country tour soon, and Sousa knew that he must return to America at once to take over the band's business affairs. While the ship steamed out of the harbor, he paced on the deck and began to sense a rhythmic beat of the band playing within his brain. When he reached shore, he set down the measures that had been in his mind, and not a note of it has ever changed. The Stars and Stripes Forever was completed on Christmas Day in 1896, and is considered to be by far the most popular march ever written. It is now the official march of the United States of America.
So, thank you once again for coming. I hope you enjoyed yourself. And again, if you did, hopefully we'll see a lot of you on December 16th for our holiday concert. Thank you again.
Thank you.